Hi, I'm Marc Stoudemire, and welcome to Season 3 of Get to the Joke. I can't wait for you guys to see what I have in store for you this season. 11 new comics, 11 new stories, unbelievable amount of just advice and just vulnerability about the lives of comedians and how that translates to the jokes that you love to hear on stage. Again, all the content this season will be completely free on my YouTube channel. I just ask that you do me just one small favor. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Please rate and review me wherever you review your podcast. I truly appreciate that you guys do that for me. Again, you can also visit me at my website, marcstod.com, where you can see all my upcoming show dates, along with any other content that I put out. Again, please leave a comment, like, subscribe to this channel. It means so much to me that you do that. And now, without further ado, let's go ahead and get to the joke.
I saw an ad the other day that really pissed me off, okay? It was an ad for a hygiene product that claimed it was going to eliminate feminine odor. That's right, all of them. Now, vagina havers, what they're saying is if you want to catch a man, you gotta catch him by surprise. They can't smell us coming! Now, it took me a second, but I figured out why I was so angered by this commercial. It's because there is another set of commercials that uses this verbiage, and it's cat litter commercials to eliminate feline odor. So you know what they're saying, right? What they're saying is the natural, normal smell of our secret gardens is just as offensive as the smell of cat piss! The worst piss! Seriously, for a second, can you imagine if we lived in a world where we talked about pussy stank like that on the reg, all the time, every day, sir? No, of course not, he's mortified! Like, picture it, what if your friends move in together? Of course, you're talking shit on them. You're like, did you hear Dave and Katie moved in together? Guess he's not worried about getting his security deposit back. You get over to their new house, he's like, I'm so sorry, we've sprayed the couch 1,000 times. It's where she sits for American Idol. I don't come out. Or maybe they buy the product, right? Maybe they buy the product, maybe the product works. You get over to their new studio apartment, you walk in, you take a deep breath, you say, my God, you wouldn't even know you had a woman in here. I'm Alyssa Al-Dookhi. Thank you all so much. You're so hot.
Well, welcome to Get to the Joke. Our guest today is one of my favorite comics, Alyssa Al-Dookhi, who I get to see on the suburbs from time to time, doing comedy and slaying audiences. Alyssa is a Kuwaiti American comedian, writer, and event host in Philadelphia. Alyssa's mission is to create spaces for marginalized artists to flourish. You can see them on the Netflix karaoke competition show, Sing On with Titus Burgess, CNN's United Shades of America with W. Kamal Bell, and as a warm-up comic on season 5 of Netflix Queer Eye. Check out their podcast, Makeup or Breakup, an awesome podcast. Al-Dookhi has performed at Helium Comedy Club, Asylum in New York City, and has headlined at Punchline Philly. And you can follow them at The Dukeness. Welcome, Alyssa, to our little web series.
Marc?
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'm so excited. I'm such a theory nerd. I can't wait to get into this.
No, this is awesome. I wanted to I know we have 2 hours and I'm already like concerned that there's not going to be enough time for me to get through everything I want to talk to you about, because not only do I look up to you as a comic, but you're also so different than anyone who I've ever met. I mean, just your background is so different. And I think the way that what I enjoy most about your comedy is that you can relate to someone like myself who isn't really exposed to individuals from Kuwait or you know, or pansexual or anything like that, so, or a Muslim. So I think that your intellect and your communication skills are grade A level things. So I can't wait to talk to you about some things. I kind of want to start with just your childhood. You grew up to an American mother and Kuwaiti father who met his teachers over there. So can you kind of describe to me how your childhood, like how did you feel like during your childhood, because of not only were you in such a different country than America, but also you have an Americanized mother and a Kuwaiti father, which is probably different than most children that you grew up around. Even though during the Gulf War there was lots of American teachers over there, probably not a lot of people you knew were in a family like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so complicated. You already got it wrong, and we did the easiest part. That's how complex. And it's like not a big deal. So minor correction, I was born in the United States and my parents met here. Yes. So we're going to go back before I was born, because this is a great story and I only recently started telling this. But my dad came to the US for college in his mid to late 20s, probably mid 20s. So late, you know, started college late. The reason for that was my family I don't come from money. I'm not one of those Kuwaitis. Okay. Even though I do joke about that. Yeah. I'm not one of those rich Kuwaitis. And my great grandmother, however, called in a favor because she was a nursemaid to a princess, a wet nurse. Okay. And in Arab culture, we have a rule that, you know, if you breastfeed a child, you are its mother, technically. So my great grandmother went back to this princess and she was like, hey, you know, princess, you owe me one. Can you help me send a couple of my grandsons to the United States for college? And she did. And that's how my dad got to America. Oh, wow. Because of a princess. And that's how he met my mom. Okay. By my moving here. So they met here in DC, which is, I was born in DC, and we moved back to Kuwait when I was 10 months old. So I don't even, you know, I don't remember my first snow or anything. And then we moved back to Kuwait. And there was an American Women's League, which was mostly American women married to Kuwaiti dudes. So I did grow up with a ton of half and half friends, actually. Oh, wow. Okay. I have a ton of jokes about not dating anybody who is my exact mix. That's a total lie. I've dated my exact mix you know, before. And I grew up with, and I ended up hanging out with most of the half and half kids because we didn't really fit in with like the American kids and the fully British kids. A lot of my friends are half British, and we didn't really like vibe with the fully Kuwaiti or Arab kids because, you know, everybody just spends your whole life telling you you're not blank enough. No matter what it is, if you are on a spectrum of anything, people are going to kill themselves trying to tell you that you're not something enough. And so that was a lot of my childhood, was being like, what am I? And then of course the poor kid not knowing also that we're non-binary. It's like I literally, and pansexual, like I literally could not be more in between things if I wanted to, you know what I mean? Like, No, sorry. No, go ahead. I was gonna say, I definitely want to talk about the non-binary and pansexual stuff during this conversation, but did you know then in Kuwait that you were, was that something they made you aware about over there? Because I'm thinking like Kuwait is like a pseudo dictatorship, although it's an Arab country. It's more liberal than some of the Middle Eastern countries. So I mean, like as far as like how they treat women, I mean, it's not like it is over here, and it's not great over here either. But it's, you know, it's not Iraq or Iran either over there. So
were you aware of these kind of different sexual orientations when you were living in Kuwait, or is that kind of off the grid?
The way I'm going to talk about it is, you know, first of all, I want to say every culture makes us compromise a part of our identities, and we have to recognize that no matter what. And there's no place that you're going to get to be 100% yourself.
Yes.
And so I do want to say that, first of all. Second of all, I have always known who I am, whether or not I had the words for it or not. I have a great memory of hearing like the song Just a Girl by No Doubt. And I was like, that's all that you'll let me be. Not because people were shitting on me because I was a girl. It was because I knew I was more than that. I was like, why are you just letting me be a girl? Like I have so much more than girl. It just seemed so limiting. And I was like, that's just not for me. And I do remember the first time somebody told me that gay was bad. I was like, I was like hanging out with my friends. This was when I lived in Maryland when I was 9. I mean, there's so much back and forth. But these, I was hanging out with my Mormon friends because the Muslims hung out with the Mormons because I guess same energy sometimes.
I would have never guessed that.
You know, I only hung out with Mormon kids, but of course you come with like 8 to 10 friends in one family, so that's pretty nice. But I was hanging out with my Mormon friends, and I was like, man, I think Ellen's so cool. Just for the record, my position on Ellen has changed since I was 9. But I was like, man, I think Ellen's great. And my 2 friends were like, Ellen's gay. And I was just like, okay, gay's bad. Got it. Like, I won't bring up the fact that I thought about kissing him before.
So it's crazy that over here in America is where the gay is bad came into play, not over in the Middle East.
9 years. 9 years I waited to find out the gay was bad. According to some people.
So because what is Kuwait's position on gay people?
Not great.
Okay. Can you be open in Kuwait or not at all?
No. Okay. Everything. I mean, I will say it's a very private culture. So like our personal lives are really not up for discussion. As a rule, culturally.
Oh, wow.
Okay. I struggle with that being a stand-up comedian and just as a human being of being able to open up to people and really talk about like what's going on. And honestly, stand-up kind of and being funny is a bit of a wall I put up so that instead of you asking me an invasive question about my personality, I can make you laugh and we can move on. And I think my tolerance for personal questions is a little lower than your average American for that reason.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. That's interesting to
notice
know.
how I just totally didn't answer the question. I just deflected. I just realized I was like, I just took us somewhere else.
I mean, you know, learning someone else's culture is something I'm definitely into because it's not every day I run into somebody who's from Kuwait. So no, you're definitely, I think I'm going to learn a lot on this web series, which is a good thing. So being from
Inshallah, which means God willing. That's very
so what you feel comfortable with sharing then, like growing up, like, did you feel that you ever fit in growing up in Kuwait? No, not at all.
No.
And was there any kind of
well, reading. I loved to read. Okay. Loved reading, read all the time, and theater. I got involved in theater when I was like 9, and have been on a stage doing something every single year for the rest of my life. And acting, I really love acting and I really love singing. And when I found stand-up, I really loved that as well. But yeah, just I'm a very in my head kind of person. So anything that I can like obsess over learning it, I'll spend a lot of time with it.
So tell me about this struggle then to be, because like I know a lot about you just through your stand-up. Like you and I could have never had a conversation. We've had very few conversations in general, but like I through your stand-up, I know a lot about you. I know that you're non-binary, you're pansexual, that you grew up in Kuwait. Like there is a lot of personal stuff that you put out there. Now again, like and even like I've you know, doing the research for you, I watched everything that you have out there, and like you go into it, like during your Frist Person Arts thing, you talk about a very specific trauma event that happened in your life. So like when you tell me like, hey, you know, like it's my culture to be private, how do you struggle then with like kind of tearing down that barrier, or or disavowing it, or what? Tell me like what that's like for you to like be personal on stage and then not be personal off stage.
Yeah. Well, it's very controlled, right? Like one thing I love about stand-up is you are not allowed to talk to me. You're not allowed to ask a follow-up question of how did that make you feel? I'm like, just fucking laugh, you stupid idiot. Like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have used the word idiot, but
there's no safeguards on this. You're fine.
I'm like, ooh, a bad word. But I just want people to laugh and move on rather than like if people come up to me and have a conversation and they're like, what was that like? I'm like, please stop.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then with that specific video you're talking about, honestly, I wish I've never watched it. I performed it and I was immediately like, there was a kid in the front row because they thought it was like story time. And I was like, this is not a story for kids. That's telling them. I walked them. And I just, that's not something I talk about very often, and something I should process. And it just, I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I can't bring myself to watch the video. I don't remember what I've said.
Okay.
I do that thing where I black out on stage. I don't know if that happens to other people. No. I've heard other people say it, but yeah, I'll like write my set list, memorize it, and then absolutely, I have to record my sets. Otherwise, I don't know what happened.
Which is kind of crazy because you're a very in the moment comic. I've been on shows with you where the audience will engage with you and you'll go into the audience. Like the one show we did, they offered you hummus. And instead of shutting down and like being a robot, you went into the crowd and they hummus the whole thing and people were laughing and everything about it. So
that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, so it's interesting. So you black out on stage. I'm getting way too ahead of yourself. I'm way too ahead of myself. I do want to talk about
we're jumping all over the place.
I know we are. So I guess I'm trying to understand how you are on stage and to understand your jokes. I kind of want, because because like right when you told me like, hey, I'm a very private person and I don't like to share a lot about myself. Like I feel like you're putting up a roadblock in this conversation. Like we're not going to go down some deep roads, but I want to understand who you are and understand like what possesses Alyssa to not tell Jerry Seinfeld jokes. Like she saw a funny sign the other day and talks about that. Like she wants to talk about her, even in the bio that I just read that, it's your goal to like get out into the world, like a more accepting, more equality culture. In order to do that, you have to kind of be like stripped down to your core and let people see you inside yourself. So if I wanted to ask you the question, like, tell me a little bit about growing up with all these kind of being different than at least other people were, willing to share for you. What would you tell me? What was that like for you growing up?
It was lonely. I mean, I was a lonely kid. I had friends, but you kind of feel like you don't fit in with everybody. The closest group of friends I had was my theater friends. I was part of a youth theater group, and it was great. I mean, we were weird and loving and awkward and talented, and it was just like the greatest group of people. I had a core group of weirdo friends in my high school that I spent a lot of time with. A lot of people who ended up also being queer. I mean, like you just kind of finding each other, but this is in Kuwait, and we never talked about it at the time, necessarily. But now as adults, and I think that also kind of answers a question that you're talking about is like, over time, I've had to open up. Like you have to open up a little bit to get stuff done and to work on yourself. And a lot of these jokes come from questions I've been asked my whole life. Like, why do you talk like that? Or what religion are you? I remember getting teased by the fifth graders when I was in third grade because the fifth graders said, do you pray like this or like this? Do you pray like this? And I was like, we do both. And they were like, you can't do both. You have to pick one. And I was like, well, they want me to say Muslim, so I'll say Muslim. And like, I am a Muslim. I consider myself a Muslim. I am a Muslim. I don't know what to tell, I consider myself a moderate Muslim. People don't like that. Those are my number one TikTok haters are the haram police, which happy to oblige. The
Yeah.
Haram police on TikTok. They don't like my joke about being a mad Muslim. They're like, so you're not a Muslim? And I'm like, no, I can just like be varying levels of Islamic.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Other religions get to do it. I want to do it.
Oh.
People hate that. It doesn't work. I can't change anybody's mind. But yeah, I mean, it was lonely. The theme of my life, and what I'm realizing now as a 33-year-old is, and my mission also is like to help people create the communities they need. Like, if your family isn't doing it for you, you'll find a friend. If your friends aren't doing it for you, go find a chat room with people with the same interests, people who feel the same about you. You know, get on TikTok, get on Reddit, find those people, set up a meeting every week so you guys can talk about your feelings, you know. Find people who can help you accomplish your dreams that are like you. And that you see yourself reflected in. Like, I spent my whole life thinking like there aren't people like me, and the more I go, I have a huge network of people who I see ourselves in each other now. But it took a lot of intention, and it took a lot of like finding that and being like, well, first of all, these parts of me are okay, and second of all, somebody else has figured out that they feel the same way, and I gotta go find them.
So it sounds like you're trying to do now, you're trying to afford opportunities for people that you weren't afforded as a child. Do you think you had a childhood where you could experiment or make mistakes, or did you live a childhood that other people wanted you to live?
I think a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. My parents were definitely more lenient than a lot of my friends' parents. I was the friend who like took everybody's cigarettes at the end of the hang because my parents knew I wasn't smoking cigarettes. And so my parents would be like, why do you have 3 packs of cigarettes? And I'm like, well, Donna and Noor like needed to like hide their cigarettes. And and my parents would be like, all right. I mean, I don't know why they believe me because everyone's supposed to smoke one, but for the most part, like I was like a really good kid. Like I love rules, I love control, I love making sure everything is just so when it comes to like situations. So
now do you think that kind of like that example you just gave to me was only really for you because your mother was American? Had your mother been Kuwaiti, do you think it would go in a more traditional Kuwaiti household sense, or do you think your American mother had a lot of influence on your upbringing to let you kind of bend these rules?
Yeah, well, and I think, you know, my dad had a lot to do with it too, because my dad chose to raise us that way as well, you know. I mean, it was definitely both my parents. Just they were like, they trusted me. You know what I mean? I was a really good kid. I really didn't like screwing up because I hate getting in trouble. I still do. And
So what's your parents' attitude then with you doing stand-up then?
Oh my gosh. So because I did theater my whole life, and my parents like saw that I was good and saw that I enjoyed it and got a lot out of it, I actually stopped doing like tons of theater in college because I was focusing on my studies and smoking marijuana. And so I didn't do a lot of theater then. And then I moved to Philly after college in Michigan, and wasn't doing theater because I was working in restaurants. That was my passion. I was going to be a restaurant manager. Like, I mean, it was kind of glamorous, I'm not gonna lie, but I was like 23 with a real job. It was great. But you know, you don't have time to do anything when you're working in a restaurant. You know, so I just didn't do it. My parents were always like, you're really not getting on stage? They're like, are you singing? And I'm like, in the shower? Like, I don't, you know, I'm not doing anything. So when I started doing stand-up, they were like, thank God, we were worried about you. We're so glad you're performing again, because it's just part of who you are, and you're your best self when you're doing it. And it's always been something I'm super passionate about.
They've never rebuffed you as far as your material, as far as what you say on stage.
I have a joke about my dad, and the first time my dad saw it, it was at Helium, and I get off stage and my dad's standing by the wall like this. And I'm like, hi, Baba. And he goes, I don't like that joke. And I was like, okay. And he was like, you did a great job. That was great. You were hilarious. Like, I mean, the thing is, it's jokes, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I think my
Oh,
parents understand
let me-
these jokes. I'm not the kindest person I could possibly be to my parents,
Okay.
perhaps in my jokes, but I think they know that for real. I love them and I value them in my life.
You're good. And so that makes a difference too, I'm sure. If you were bad, I'm sure it'd be a different story.
Yeah.
So what is stand-up comedy like in Kuwait? Is there stand-up comedy, and what's it like if there is, if it's out there?
There is stand-up comedy in Kuwait. The last time I went, which was like 2 years ago, I wanted to go check out an open mic at the Applebee's, and it was no longer functioning. But there are Arab comics. I was supposed to go to Palestine with Amr Zahar, which would have been amazing. It would have been my first time performing stand-up
Wow.
in an Arab country. And I didn't get to do that because of the pandemic. So
okay.
yeah, I've never performed. I've performed for mostly to all Arab crowd before, but in the United States.
How would you do your material in Palestine, in Kuwait, if you were given the opportunity? Or are there sanctions around what you can say?
I mean, I definitely have to change what I'm going to say, right? Because on a basic level, because like it doesn't operate the same way. Like the way we do stand up is different. The things we talk about in stand up are different. The way we do it might be this, the way I create it might be the same. But there are just some really big changes I would have to make. It would be an extreme challenge. I would definitely wait to do it till the absolute last minute as opposed to preparing like I should. And I say that, but like I prepare in a way, like I'm always the one where I come to an assignment and I'm like, oh, I really didn't prepare. I only did research for like the last 2 days. And people are like, I haven't even looked at it. I go a little bit too deep into it, but yeah, that would be, I'm just thinking about the process that would have, because I'd have to work in some jokes with the language and the perspective changes, because a lot of the times, and I've experienced this, like even just in the United States doing jokes for a Southwest Asian, North African or Arab crowd is, the perspective shifts. Like if I go to Helium, I'm like, this is what you guys think of me. But when I do, a show at Yellow Punk, which is a queer, trans affirming Southwest Asian, North African space, I'm like, hey, here's what people are saying about us, and here's how I respond to it. Or here's how people approach me, and here's how I respond to it. And I take out the pressure on like you. Yeah. And I change it to like us.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that'd be exciting. Not that, I mean, I'm assuming you would do it in Arabic, and I wouldn't understand a word of what you were saying, but it would be interesting if there was like subtitles.
That'd be a huge challenge.
Like knowing your jokes the way they are, and then seeing how you tell them would be very interesting, I would think. I like, this just shows my ignorance. Like, would they? I guess Palestine, like, said yes, but would they let a non-binary comic do comedy in Kuwait?
I mean, I would not be out in Kuwait. I would make people, I wouldn't correct anybody if they use the wrong pronouns, or it wouldn't even come up. I would just leave. I have to do it all the time. I just have to leave a part of myself home, depending on where I'm going. Like even when I go on stage, and it's so funny because before I came out, I used to call putting on my makeup to go do stand-up getting into drag. I should have known. I wasn't a girl back then, but I always called it getting into drag. And, I do kind of have a character that I created to protect myself as a person who didn't know I was trans. And that person was exaggerated for the stage. So the person you see in all those stand-up clips, like, is not this guy. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a totally different person, because that is a glamorous lady who has something to say. And I am sitting here in my jammies with a cup of herbal tea, hoping nobody makes fun of me. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that is the thing that I'm not sharing. You know what I mean? That is the barrier there.
So you say like I had to leave a little piece of myself at home. It seems like you've been leaving a little piece of yourself at home your whole life. So at what point do you feel that like you will say no to situations, even if it's like a cool situation like doing comedy in Arabic, just because like if this person's gonna call me she and a woman and all this stuff, or they're telling me like you can't talk about, 10 minutes of the 15-minute clip that you sent me, like where do you think in your career you will just draw that line in the sand, or will you never because the opportunity is great to turn down?
I think it's a complicated question. I do feel like I will have to do it for the rest of my life. But a lot of times it also depends on like how much I'm willing, because to do that, I would have to give up my life in Kuwait. I would have, unless something dramatically changes there, I wouldn't be able to go back. So I'm going to continue to compromise so that, because in a way I get to have all of my experiences by compromising pieces of myself. It's something that, queer immigrants deal with all the time. It's this like constant shifting of what do I need to take with me at this time? What part of myself can I sacrifice today? What do I have the capacity to sacrifice today? And the hard part about that is, I'm creating a personality now, like through this internet presence. Since I haven't been out on stages, I really have been staying home. I'm a fraidy cat. I'm a chicken. Okay. I've been inside resting this whole time. And that, and honestly, I'm just a bit too sad to tell jokes. Here's some vulnerability for you, Marc Stoudemire. I'm a bit too sad to tell jokes. And it just, honestly, I've had a big perspective shift. And, I used to really want to get famous. I've been on stage since I was 9 years old. I wanted to get famous. I wanted to be the most known person in the whole wide world. And, I sat inside for 2 years and I realized that like, I've gotten everything I needed. I've been on Netflix. I know my craft. I feel confident. I'm able to teach people my craft, which has been really rewarding beyond anything. Teaching people stand up and how comedy can help you be a better person is another class I've been teaching, and that has been really rewarding. And I think it would be miserable to be famous. I don't think I'd like it. I like this a lot better, sitting at home with my silly little cup of herbal tea and playing with my cat, who I can hear outside the door right now, playing in her toys, and, having a pizza with Matt, my boyfriend, at the end of the night. Like, that's a hell of a lot better than like paying for a hotel room in a city with no bar open past 10 p.m. So the last year was like really nice. And I was like, oh, you know what I can do with all this extra time and energy? That, and I stopped working in restaurants and started writing full time. Is like, I can use these skills that I no longer need to help people like learn how to network, learn how to write jokes, learn how to create a space where you feel like you can be yourself fully. And I guess that kind of answers your other question. It's like, because I have to sacrifice myself in a bunch of different places, I just have to make sure I do have places and people with whom I can be my full self.
Okay. If I wanted to see Alyssa as their full self, where, not as a friend, like not as a friend, I want to see you as your full self. What is the best avenue to do that? Is it stand-up? Is it these classes? What would you tell me? As close to as full self as I can get.
Yeah. If it's stand-up, it depends on the venue, right? Like at a Yellow Punk show, like I really, it's like life-changing. Being in a room where everybody feels like you. Teaching classes is also great because I really am exercising my compassion. I feel like you have to be so compassionate to teach, and you really have to be willing to learn and unlearn as you're teaching. And that's been a really great process for me. But really, you said as a friend or as a
not as a friend.
Not as a friend.
Yeah.
Not as a friend. Yeah. That, and I'm creating a whole new show. I just actually finished closed submissions for a writer's room of my own. So I'm creating a queer Southwest Asian North African writer's room for a talk show for people who look like me, so that me, when I was that kid in Kuwait who didn't feel like I could connect, I could go online. Someone like me can go online and watch me say what I'm saying to you right now, that it's okay to be you. You just got to find the people that you can be you around and figure out how we can navigate the rest of the world together.
Okay.
And here are other people who do that. Here's how wonderful they are. Here's how talented they are. Here's what they bring to the table. Look at us.
Okay, awesome. It's interesting to me that you said, like, I would like to work on this more like joyful attitude with the audience during my set, but one of the first things you told me at the top of the call is like, the audience is not allowed to talk to me. So I feel like there's a huge bridge to go across here for you. If the audience is not allowed to interact with you, but you want a joyous response, like a joyous interaction.
It's all about control. I manufacture all that shit. You know what I'm saying? I make you feel like you have a place in the conversation, but really I've engineered it so that I know what your reaction is going to be. And if I don't, I have a contingency plan. You know what I mean? Like, there is nothing accidental about what happens. I mean, you happen to catch me do something that was me working on this, right? Like, that is working on me being joyful, being mirthful. Like, if somebody is heckling me, I lean into it, which as a new comic, you're like, shut up. Like, talk to you. I have things to say about my penis, or whatever your joke is about. You know what I mean? Like, my jokes are about my penis, but for those of you who weren't at this show at a winery in the middle of nowhere, I have a joke about hummus, and the audience was like, oh, we love hummus. We have hummus. And I ran over there and I just took a bite of their food. And that's an improv thing. I mean, it's yes anding, right? If you have hummus, I eat hummus. Like, it's taking all of that. And then of course with a negative heckler, you know, sometimes you have to do it. Like, that was in good fun. That was easy to respond to. But you have to take the same attitude into a negative.
So I definitely want you to educate me with pansexuality and non-binary. Obviously these are I don't know, identities that I don't come in contact with. I did high level overview it prior to this interview. Like, when I first read the definition of pansexual, I was like, oh, she's bisexual. And I was like, oh no, bisexual is gender, pansexual is there is no gender. So can you tell me, like, is it that you have no gender, or there is no gender in the world that you like acknowledge?
I mean, the way I've always thought of it is gender's a bit silly, and I don't think it really means anything, which is why I gravitated towards the word pansexual. That's kind of fallen out of favor. I still use it to talk about myself, but pansexual and bisexual are basically the same thing. And yeah, it's just never felt right to me. Like, it just feels like bullshit, right? And I feel like that's kind of something I talk about in my stand-up, or something that I like to do, is it's like, hey, let's take this thing we all take for granted and like really look at it. Like, I don't think it makes as much sense as we've been taught to think. Like, you know, gender is silly. Like, the things that make someone a man or a woman also make a non-man or a non-woman. You know, there's no way scientifically that that's true. So, you know, and plus a personal feeling of, you know, I'm more than just one of two things. And I'm not going to let your expectations of a woman-shaped person from your experience, that's what I look like. In my experience, I don't know what a woman-shaped person looks like. That doesn't mean anything to me. So your expectations of that, what am I going to, you know, how am I going to beat you to the punch of assuming things about me based on my perceived gender?
So is it like a dropping of labels? You do that for most things? Do you drop labels across the board, or is it specifically with gender? I know you went to school for gender studies, so I don't know if that's just where you put your flag, or is it like labels across, like is it like religion and other things as well that you don't like to label, or is it just specifically with, and race, is it specifically just gender?
I don't know if it's necessarily about labels, because anytime I use a word for something, for myself, about something, it's for somebody else's benefit. You know what I mean? Like, people ask, like, if I say my pronouns are they, them, your question is, what does that mean? For me, okay, I'm just here. You know what I mean? If somebody, if in conversation, you never came up to me and asked me about my race or my sexuality. We spent time together. You absorbed this information. That is how that is supposed to work, as opposed to somebody coming up to me and saying, what are you? You know what I mean? Or like, your haircut's a little gay looking. You gay? It's like, let's have a drink and I'll let you know who I fucked in the last 10 years. Like, I don't know what's like, why is it? So, I mean, it's all for everybody else's benefit. Like, in my perfect world, I would meet you and assume nothing about you. You know what I mean? You could be anybody. And unfortunately, that's not how it works. And doing stand-up really pays my bills.
I wish I could operate that high level. I can't. I can't.
I mean, that's kind of why stand-up is interesting to me, because I started doing stand-up once again to answer all those questions people have about me. Why do you have a short haircut? Why don't you have an accent? What is your race? What is your nationality? Where are you from? Where were you born? What's your mom? What's your dad? I mean, like, it's just question after question after question that I had to write a 2-minute rap about it to get it out, to get it over with. And because I answered those questions so many times in my life, I was basically just workshopping bits for people, just because I was like getting bored of this regular answer and I had to make it fun for me.
Okay. I like that. I like a little spin to it. Now, you mentioned, and it kind of caught me off guard a little bit when you said like, that I think you said you were trans, and I did not make that connection. Like, I didn't realize that people are pansexual. So you also identify as transsexual? Okay.
Transgender.
Transgender. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry. What's the difference between the two? I don't know what the difference is.
I will let people do their own research on that, because I want to answer the other question, which is not transgender is an umbrella term for not cisgender, which is the sex assigned at birth, or the gender assigned at birth matches your chromosomes and your body, right? Whereas me, like, my gender doesn't match my gender assigned at birth.
Okay.
So
I get it. Okay.
Under the umbrella of transness, you could be a trans man, you could be a trans woman, or you can be a multitude of other things. And the simplest word that I can say for someone is non-binary, that people know. I am all sorts of things. I mean, the real answer is, people can call me whatever they want, but I don't want to get she, her every day. So I go by they, them.
Okay.
That's the real answer to it. Like, I think gender is silly, but if to not be identified as a woman all the time, I go by they, them.
And I heard an interview that you mentioned, like, I don't like when people like refer to me with like, like lady, or kind of like other kind of like casual colloquialisms with female, but like, you're okay with dude. So so why not he, him? Why they, them?
Again, people bring too much to it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be seen as a man, and I don't want to be seen as a woman. And I've always used dude and guys as gender neutral. And unfortunately, maybe it's the built-in misogyny in my head, is that male terms are neutral. You know what I mean? Like, that's something that I think about a lot, is why I like dude and guys. And I have to stop myself from saying, hey guys, to a group of people, because I don't know. Some people don't want to be called a guy. So, I mean, the long and short of it is, these words that we use are to make people feel seen when we're in their presence, right? Like, if someone I love, who has known this about me for a long time, keeps messing up my pronouns and saying she, her, or girl, or my female relative word, or whatever it is, my daughter, my sister, my niece, if they use those words, it means that when you're not around me, you're thinking about me wrong, and you're not seeing me, and you're not practicing it when you're out of my presence. And I have let you in, and I have allowed you to know me more fully.
Okay.
So I see you not respecting this big vulnerability that I have put on the table for our relationship. I'm trusting you to see me because I want you to see me. That's a huge vulnerability right there.
Yeah.
So to constantly be reminded that you are not taking the time to see me, that's where that gets hurtful. It all comes down to compassion. It's not about, I want you to see me like this. I don't want to be like this. I don't want to be like that. It's like, I just want to be myself. And these are the words that you understand to talk to me with respect. So I have to use these words.
Okay. Now, have your parents adjusted to this, or are they still?
We're not going to talk about this.
Oh, okay. All right. Oh, I kind of want to then jump into your joke writing and kind of go through all different phases of how you set up a joke and how you tell a joke. And I always like to start with like the scene, which is like where you get your material. Now, the joke that you sent us, which will be shown, is it's, I would say, like it's a very observational joke about an advertisement on TV that you saw, but then there's a sprinkledness over top with like, here are my feelings on it. Where like observational, where you think of like a Jim Gaffigan or a Jerry Seinfeld, where you can tell that their opinion on it is ridiculous. You don't really get into like kind of like the socio-political commentary that they really have on it. In some maybe, but yours is with this joke, it's like, what's wrong with the female hygiene odor that that they have to then spend millions of dollars on research and development to create a chemical that will eliminate it. You have a very well thought out joke on it. So you can use this joke, you can use all your jokes, like a lot of jokes are about yourself and your background. Like, where do you get your material? Where does most of your material come from? That you mentioned like you talk about yourself a little bit, but you tell me where you mostly mine your material from.
Yeah. With that one specifically, there were various feelings I'd always had. Like, I hate fucking Summer's Eve. I think it's disgusting. I sent you a picture of one of the first iterations of that joke. And I spent like 5 minutes calling it vagina poison. And it was actually just a rant against Summer's Eve. And I couldn't like work it out. But the kicker was I was literally sitting on this couch in this room in this next door watching television, and an ad for Summer's Eve came on, and then an ad for cat litter came on, and I was like, they use the same language. They use the same language to talk about these two products, and it's horrible. And I go on this rant, and Matt's like, that's a joke, you have to write it down. So I immediately went and I wrote down what I said, and I was like, how did I say that? Da, da, da. And he helped me. He's a wonderful part of the process as well. And so I just wrote it down, and then I workshopped it. I went into a rant about vagina poison that I ended up taking out, and I ended up pretty much just sticking with the original things that I had said, like when I was yelling at the television. And then, so I take the funny thing that I say, right? Like, you have a funny thing that you say, and this is how I write a joke. I'm walking around, I say something funny, somebody laughs at it. I'm like, that's a good thing to note. I'll write it down, that was a funny turn of phrase, or that this idea was interesting. It's a premise. It's just a premise that I have written down. So I'll take my premise, which, and then I'll sit with it and I'll look at it, and I'm like, okay, so why is this important to me? Like, why am I gravitating towards this subject? Like every sentence, right, has a subject and an object. How do I feel about these two things? And how can I break both of those things down? So I'll create a list of all the things I know about cat litter, all the things I know about vaginas and vagina smell. And so I have, cat piss, I have ammonia smell, I have sprays, I have words about smell, and so I've created all these lists, and then using rule of threes structure, I'll take the best three and work those right into that. And that's my, like, the very basic joke formula is absolutely my favorite. It's where my jokes start with, here's a premise, here's three things to support it, and here's my punchline, or maybe the third one is the punchline. But very nerdy, I write it like I'm writing an essay, right? Like, I have something to say, here's how I prove that thing, and then I'm going to make you laugh at the very end, and that's going to seal it. Like, I need you to believe that we should not be talking about vaginas the way we talk about cat piss. And I mean, it already, okay, we should all agree on this. You know what I'm saying? But it's my job as a comedian to persuade you.
Yeah. Now, are all your jokes personal? Because I would consider this a personal joke because I'm knowing a little bit about your personality from this joke. Are all, and you know, your jokes you do about being Muslim, being a bad Muslim, and you know, and other jokes about your sexual, you know, your gender or non-gender. Is every joke of yours, they have to pass a litmus test that they are personal to you, that no other comic could write the same joke that you can write? I mean, you wouldn't write a joke about
that's
Hot
a mark
Pockets.
of a I could write a joke about Hot Pockets, but I would make it personal. You know what I mean? Because here's the thing, is especially because my experience is perceived as unique, like I'm going to think different than you. And if you could write a joke that I'm telling, I wrote a bad joke. We shouldn't be able to come up with the same joke about something because you have different eyes than me. You're all the way over there from me. You know what I mean? Like, we could be looking at the same thing. You and I should each write a different joke about this Zoom call right now. And it would be completely different, even though we sat here experiencing the same thing for 2 hours. You know what I mean? Like that's how it should be. And that's something I tell my students. It's like, okay, so we have a joke about you going to pick up coffee, but like, how does Marc pick up coffee? Like, because Marc has this, that, and the other thing at home. Marc grew up doing this. Marc had somebody who drank coffee this way when he was growing up. You have to go this place. And that's why the coffee, like, even if you're telling a joke about a coffee shop, it's like you had to go to your job. You had a thing happening. It's all personal. I mean, you could, I personally think that like, it's always your viewpoint. Even if you're like, don't you hate sitting in traffic because you think this, that, and the other thing? It's like, yeah, but I thought it.
Okay. No, I mean, definitely valid with like putting your perspective on something. And I think what makes you such a great joke writer and a brilliant storyteller is the fact that like you're totally different from me, but I can relate and find what you say very funny, which is a very your communication piece has to be strong on that, because there's other comics, even you don't need to go outside Philadelphia, who are non-binary or are Muslim or or not from this country. None of them can do what you can do, Alyssa, as far as what I consider, at least the ones that I've seen. So it's taking then like. So obviously the joke you sent me is from a commercial, but do you, when like some of the jokes that you're writing right now, or even maybe for the talk show, are you looking at your own experiences and bring them to the stage, or does that violate the private kind of like, not, I don't want to pull the curtain back too far, or are you willing to pull the curtain back all the way and let me and Joe Schmo into the life of Alyssa Al-Dookhi?
I think I'm actually going in the opposite direction. I've been writing more observational. I'm writing working on a bit right now about an experience I had on the Patco. Oh, so basic, like, but and it very much is like, well, I'm coming at stand up from a new direction because I know how to write a joke. I feel like that's fine. Every day I learn something new, of course, but I think I have it down by now. But what I'm working on now is something I saw Roy Wood Jr. do in his last special, Imperfect Messenger, that I really enjoyed, because it's like an exaggeration of what I do. He has a thesis statement that he makes 4 or 5 times throughout the special, and then each chunk in between is related to the topic. His thesis is Roy Wood Jr. Roy Wood Jr. The special is Imperfect Messenger. And this is an excellent study on how to connect your ideas with a common theme, and how powerful that can be in helping people think faster because you're talking fast. And that's one reason why analogy works, and how I'm using analogy to help people along. So like with cat litter, like everybody knows about cat stuff, right? Everybody knows that cat pee smells, that you have a litter box, that you got to spray it, da, 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 da. What they don't know is how I feel about Summer's Eve, but I can use the cat words to explain my feelings about Summer's Eve. And so you have something that is a frame of reference. That's why fairy tales, like if you just need to write a joke, you have a premise and you're like, I don't know how to do it. Take a fairy tale, takes a story that everybody knows and explain it with that thing.
Okay. Yeah. I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
I forget what the original question was.
No, so, no, it was just the original question. You answered the original question, which is, are you looking at bringing your own experiences, your own stories to the stage to talk about yourself? And what my interpretation of what you said is, no, I'm just kind of telling you my opinion on things that I observe in the world, which is very valid and fair. Not that you need that from me at all, but I'm just like, I know what you mean by when you say that. If anything, I need your validation for my jokes.
You're doing great. Actually, I was just on a call with somebody I work with one-on-one, and we were talking about how great and funny you are.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. So I was gonna say, like, I think you have so many stories from what I've read about you and some of the jokes I've seen. It's like that, like, I feel you have stories that I'm like, I lean in with interest to hear more about them. Like when that, even if they're like things that you've mentioned in interviews that aren't funny, but bringing that kind of pain to the stage, like when you said you were teased coming to America, you were teased about your hair, being teased about your hair. It's like, how come I don't hear that as a joke? Or how come when you talked about that experience, that trauma that you went to with that acquaintance, how come you haven't made that a joke? Is it just that it may be a joke, it's just you haven't matured as a comic yet? Or is it like, these will never be a joke because, Marc, I told you my private life's my private life, we're not going on stage with that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing has to be funny to you, and I'm not gonna put myself in a place that still hurts me for whatever reason, whatever that is. Like, it's not worth it for some laughs and $20 and a drink ticket. You know what I'm saying? Like, and once I work that out, you guys will be the first to hear about it. You know what I'm saying? Like the audio, you guys, whatever. But like with that video of that story that I told, I wasn't ready to tell it, and I'm not ready to face it again. Like, I can't bring myself to watch it. I took it out to walk too early, and it hasn't worked its legs out yet. The first thing I wanted to write jokes about when I started writing stand-up comedy was living through the Gulf War and how it affected my life. And it took me probably like 5 or 6 years until I put the Gulf War in my stand-up, because like it needed the respect that it deserved, right? I mean, it is the single most life-changing experience in my life. And it defined the beginning of my existence, right? My first memory was during the Gulf War. So it needed time, and that was okay. And I kept trying, and you work on it. And, the unfortunate thing about a joke about sexual assault is the joke I keep coming up with is the joke that everybody's used, is that, oh, how am I going to word this? Let me get intentional with it. Right. It's like, the worst part about getting raped by a comedian is it's not very funny. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't even get a laugh out of it. What an awful thing. It's like the first joke, it's a very obvious joke. And so I need a little bit more time with that. But again, it's a space that I love that was violated, and it needs a lot of time. And like, that joke isn't good. I deserve better. My experience deserves more intention and time and therapy.
Yeah, no, I can, I don't see how you couldn't definitely lean on somebody for that. But going back, okay, so you have this material now where you're trying to then sprinkle the Al-Dookhi commentary on maybe a mundane event or something out in the world. How do you write? Like, you gave us a little bit, like, I like to make analogies so that the audience can relate, and I like to kind of like bring them into my world as much as they can, so they they know me a little bit, that because we come out the bat, I'm assuming you don't come out right off the bat with the cat joke, because then
No,
there would
that's
be
a
assumptions
closer.
all on the table. So how
You
do
got to
you
build trust before you yell
Yeah.
cat piss in a stranger's face.
Yeah. So how do you quickly let the audience in to, like, let's say like you're doing a 5-minute set. All right, it's not an open.
Yeah.
Let's say like a purposeful 5 minutes.
Mhm.
How do you bring the audience in as quickly as they can into your world, so that when you tell a joke like this cat joke, there's context to it?
The first thing I do, and I think it comes from being a person where when you see me, you have questions. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? And that's the experience I've had of other people relating to me, is when they see me, they have questions. So right off the bat, I say, I know what you think I look like. So let's get it out of the way. If there's any questions you have, if you are looking at, number one thing, people are looking at me and they're like, what race are they? What's going on?
Mhm.
What's that? What's the race? So right off the bat, I'm like, okay, let's talk about that. We'll
Mhm.
get it out of the way. It's got to be funny. It's got to be quick. The joke I use is, I know what you're thinking. I'm well aware I look like some sort of lesser Kardashian. You know what I mean? And then that allows me to explain why I look the way I do. I understand you're wondering, like, I'm not going to make you laugh if you're thinking about something else. So I have to figure out what you're thinking and beat you to the punch,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Okay. So would you qualify that as like self-deprecation, or would you qualify, because when you say lesser Kardashian, that's very self-deprecating. Do you lean on self-deprecation, or do you not like doing that because like self-deprecation is like the joke's about me, and I feel like from what I know about you, you don't ever want to be the butt of the joke kind of thing. So kind of tell me, am I right? Am I not right? Where am I at with your view on self-deprecation as using it as a joke?
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily mind it. I mean, let's be honest, I don't look like I have millions of dollars to spend on my face. So in that sense, I mean, I personally, I don't see it as self-deprecating. I see it as honest. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like,
Mhm.
you know, I never said I was ugly. In fact, I
Yeah.
said it was quite hot. You know, I look like a Kardashian. You know what I mean? But I don't look like, I look like the Wish version. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's okay. That's fine. I accept that. I do think people interpret it that way, and they're like, oh, you shouldn't. And I did a show at a sex party recently, and they all went, oh, and I was like, what? Like, I look good. You know, I came here dressed like, I just let me talk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
do think people see it as self-deprecating, but I honestly am literally just saying what you're thinking,
Yeah.
and you are creating this connection in your
Mhm.
mind, which is fine. But it does create trust, right? Like,
Mhm.
I'm saying I ain't shit.
Yeah.
Here's something else. Because if I come out and I'm like, look at me, I'm fucking amazing, da da
Mhm.
da, nobody cares. That's not funny
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
like whatever. I mean, I do think that, and eventually I go into the power balance, right?
Mhm.
Comedy's all about like, who has the power, who is the butt of the joke, do they have power, do they not have power, does the audience have power, do I have power? But the first thing I need to do is make myself a little bit vulnerable and let you trust me, like, hey, I'm just a regular guy, this is how I look, and this is why.
Mhm. Okay. So tell me, like, how do you write to be honest? Obviously,
Mhm,
you have to have a good sense of knowing who you are. So I
mhm.
think you mentioned already in this thing, like, I know who, I know who I am. I you have to have a good sense of who you are in order to be honest. How do you get to that point? What is it? Is it reflection? Do you sit and reflect on yourself and then take, like, or is it things like you mentioned, like, hey, people are asking me questions about my race? Is who you are more of like the questions people ask you, or is it more you just reflecting upon yourself and getting and writing down what you see as yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great question, because I've spent the last couple of years really figuring that out for myself.
Mhm.
Um, and a lot of the material I use mostly is like the reflection of how people see me, and then me trying to subvert it. And so I
Mhm.
think it's really interesting that now, looking back on all those things I've said about myself, it's like I'm just mitigating people's response to what
Mhm.
they see. Um, and yeah, I mean, you got to be honest with yourself. And that includes like a writing exercise I love to do is writing a list of things I hate and then saying why I love them. You know what I mean? And then writing a joke about them, like, it's my favorite fucking thing in the whole wide world. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's hard to do without sarcasm, and
Mhm.
sometimes sarcasm is the answer, but that's the easy way out. You know what
Mhm.
I mean?
Mhm.
Really put yourself in that in the shoes of somebody who loves that thing that you hate. And
Mhm.
you're going to find out more about yourself that way. And also like see who you respect. Like me, it's kids. I love kids. Kids are
Mhm.
weird. They're adaptable. They're funny. They're honest. Like
Mhm.
what is it about that I really like? And
Mhm.
so, I like mirth in Betty. Like,
Mhm.
uh, but I don't see myself with mirth. But I'm a mirthful person because I see the mirth that I love out in the world.
Yeah. Okay. So with that with that mirth aura over your joke writing process, how do you start setting up your jokes? And we can use the cat
Mhm,
joke as an example, because the
mhm.
cat joke is you know you- did you use that exercise with like I hate this product, and then you talked about how you liked it? Did you use that exercise with this joke or not with this joke? Do you remember?
The thing I did with this joke was my two lists exercise, which is I think the easiest way to write and most straightforward way to write a joke is like we have two things in this joke: cat piss, vaginas.
Mhm.
Without thinking about the other thing, write a list of all the things you know about vaginas, write a list of all the things you know about cats and cat piss,
Mhm.
and then go back and make connections where you can and see what structure fits that accordingly. In this instance, it was I have a thing I want to say. Here's three things that prove it in these act outs that I do, and then a button to hammer home that, like, maybe we should think about this thing differently, which is what I want to say
Mhm.
about it, which comes up as I process these connections.
Okay. So you're creating these lists, and I guess I like this idea of the list because it helps you then create your analogies, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you can do it. You can literally manufacture it, and I do it with classes of huge people. I'll say one person give me something, cheese. Another person give me something, doctors.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be the same thing at all. No
Mhm.
connection. So we write everything we know about cheese, everything we know about doctors, and
Mhm.
then we write cheese. Doctors are like cheese. They blank, and they blank.
Mhm.
And that's a great writing exercise to just practice like making those connections for things that
Yeah.
don't seem to work. And if you have an idea that you don't know how to explain, it's like, okay, so I want to write a joke about how I feel about pets, or
Mhm.
not pets because we're talking about cat, but how I feel about my job, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, well, my job kind of feels um, like this thing. It feels like summer camp. It feels
Mhm.
like going to the swimming pool. It feels like that. And then I pick my favorite one. And then
Mhm.
I write two lists on everything I think about work, everything people know about work,
Mhm.
most importantly, because it has to be explainable. And then the other thing, so like a fairy tale. So it's like my working at my job is like the Wizard of Oz. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
work for a woman who's like a fairy godmother, and she gives me all this knowledge. There's a winding path that I have to follow because the instructions aren't clear.
Mhm.
And I have to deal with the Wicked Witch of the West, who is my coworker Stacy in the cubicle next to me, who I wish I didn't have to sit next to every day. Whatever it is. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Obviously,
Yeah.
I would take more time to do it, but
Yeah.
you know,
I can see
that's
how this
how the list
exercise
works.
plays out though in that cat joke, because I can see where you wrote the
Hmm.
column about the summer's eve, the column about cat piss, and then I can see like where you made that brilliant about you started like comparing like the going to the apartment and the girl like the girlfriend on the couch and saying like, oh, she was
Yeah.
I expect her, I can sense she was here because American Idol was on. It's perfect. Now how do you do that? How do you okay, so for me, I can write two lists. You can give me Summer's Eve and I can write
Hmm.
what I know, and I can give you Cat Piss and I can write what I know there about it. What would you tell me is a way for you to come up with that brilliant? I don't know, would that be an analogy? I'm not sure what that is, where you're talking about like
Hmm.
you're giving now like you're now actually comparing women to cats or whatever. Like how would you
Hmm.
suggest how did you do it? Let me ask you how you did that.
I mean, for me, I literally watched two commercials. So in this
Okay.
instance, like it was played out for me.
Mhm.
But, if you want to manufacture this, it's like, I have a thing I want to talk about. It's about, let's say I want to talk about masculinity. I want to talk about how masculinity presents itself in the world.
Yeah.
You can force it the first couple of times. It's okay. I'm a big proponent of sit down and write. Like, I have piles of notebooks. I have Google Docs. I have one of those notebooks that you scan it and it goes to the Google Doc.
Yeah.
Everything gets written down. Everything gets broken down and rearranged. And I use Trello boards to rearrange jokes and ideas, and any tool I can use. It's all in writing. And then I have to practice saying it out loud and making it sound normal. So let's say the joke is about masculinity. It's like, okay, so maybe I have an idea in my head. Maybe I was talking to a friend and I was like, this guy is, he's one of these small dick men, and the way he's acting is like a toddler, for example. Okay, an easy one. You write everything you know about toddlers. You write everything you know about small dick guys. Or you force it. Do that fairy tale exercise I did. You know what I mean? Take something in that everybody knows. Right? Everybody knows toddlers. That's an easy one too. Drunk people are like toddlers. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Try a few different things. Like, don't rest until you find it. Like, and this is the hardest piece of advice that I give anybody, because I almost never follow it, is it's never like the last way to write that joke, right? Like, give it another treatment, like put another veneer on it. And this little 1, 2, 3 thesis 1, 2, 3 exercise, 2 things, 1, 2, 3, like that's a great little start, but then you go and you take those 3 things and maybe you push them and make an act out, like I did in the cat piss joke, or you find like, people really aren't relating. I find jokes that where the analogy is a specific film is not useful, right? Like, if you want to explain a film, I find that that's hard sometimes. And I know I just used the Wizard of Oz, but everybody knows the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
But if it's like a Marvel movie, people are like, I'm like this Marvel guy. And I'm like, nobody knows this Marvel guy except for you. As in my thing, I just feel like it's not something everybody understands.
Exactly.
But you can go bigger. Like, think about everybody.
Yeah.
Something that everybody knows Snow White. Everybody knows, what a teacher does. Like, such and such are like teacher, such and such are like firemen. Something that everybody can understand right away. Start as simple as possible, and then see if you can add on complexity from there.
Okay. I mean, I don't think of the 20 plus interviews I've done so far, I've heard of anybody using this method, and I think it's brilliant. I think. What I would say is, you have a very scientific mindset. You've actually used a couple of scientific terms during the course of the conversation: thesis, proof. So you set up your thesis. You're like a rigorous scientific thesis. It's something nobody said before. All right, and then you try to prove your statement to the audience. Is that kind of what you do? Okay.
That's 100% it. I studied history in college, and that's what you do when you write history. It's like, I have these primary documents here. I wrote my thesis in college about gender identities in Arab American communities in the 20th century. I had a lot of books on Arab Americans in the 20th century, but nobody had looked at it from a gender standpoint yet. And so I was kind of stuck creating this new thesis. So I read a lot of books on gender, and I read a lot of books on Arabs in America starting in the 1800s. And I had to create new ideas out of it. How did gender affect this? How was their situation affect their gender, and so on and so forth? And that's really what a great comic does. Like, I would challenge anybody to go back and watch, what are they trying to prove to me? Like, how am I being persuaded? And I learned my joke structure from writing history.
Okay. That's 100%. I mean, it's a good way of doing it. Especially when you're, that makes it relatable, because you're trying to prove it, especially when you're doing your 2 lists and you're talking about, here's like, hey, I want, here's what people know about Muslims. Here's what I want them to know about Muslims. Now let's just, analogy.
Exactly.
I don't know what
analogy.
I don't know. I'm an idiot.
Absolutely. And then after that, like you take it out in the world, right? And then the best thing that someone can say to you is, actually, you know, when you said this, what I was thinking was this. And it's like, great, I need to know what you're thinking because I need to anticipate your thoughts.
Yeah.
I need to address it so that you aren't wondering about it. Like simple thing. I have a joke about my stepmother saying that she loves our cheese in Philadelphia, which is cream cheese. And people would come up to me over and over and over again, and they would say, I thought you were going to say whiz. And I was like, okay, so I have to throw the word cheese whiz in there or else I'll never hear the end of it. I don't necessarily think it adds to the joke. I don't think it makes it any better. But if I don't say it, I won't fucking stop hearing about it.
So it sounds like you're very written when you go up on stage for the first time. Do you do any kind of working it out on stage, or is it like, do you work out jokes on stage, or is that no, you just take the feedback from the stage and then rewrite again and then go back?
Most of the time it's very, very written. This pussy joke I did on stage, actually. And the first way I said it stuck. I think because I was just passionate about it. And again, I think that formula is pretty much foolproof for writing a quick and dirty joke. I personally, like, I think it's my best written joke. I think it's also the simplest joke structure that I have.
Tell me about your editing process, because it's a very short setup. I mean, the joke, I think in total is 2.5 minutes. Within, you know, before you get to the first punchline, and then you saw a commercial about female hygiene odor, and that's it. You know, that's pretty much all I need to know. So do you, when you're writing, I mean, there's so much writing going on ahead of time. What is it that you do to get it down to a 1-sentence setup, which is what this joke is? Because I'm very wordy, so I need all the advice I can get here.
Oh man, this shit's my bread and butter. This is another thing that you have to do in history is you got to get it to the fucking point. So I, when I was writing history, would often write too concise and would have to add on information because I was just like getting to it real quick. With comedy, I kind of do the opposite thing. Like, I will write every fucking idea I have about everything. Like with those lists, like every brain dump, and I just write. And then I'll put it down and I'll walk away from it. I'll put it down and I'll walk away from it and I'll say it out loud to a friend and ask them to summarize. This is a great exercise. Say a joke to somebody and then tell them in 3 bullet points, what did you understand? 90% of the time, your setup is the first thing they write. You know what I mean? Like, and if you put down that notebook and you come back to it, you're like, oh my God, I was talking a bunch of bullshit. But what I'm really trying to say is, I don't think these commercials talk nicely about people's vaginas because they talk about them like cactus. You know what I mean? Like, you can summarize it in 1 sentence. We don't need as much information as you're giving us, especially because we can't hold it. You know, we're seeing 3, 4, if you're unlucky, 8 to 10 comics a night. Listen, if you're listening to this episode and you're booking a show, 5 comics max. Quit it. Costs. Enough. And we can't absorb this information. You're asking far too much, and which is why analogy comes in handy, because think of it like a track that their brain is already traveling along and you're building the other track, but you can't build both tracks for them. Wow. You have to, I was listening to Brandon Jackson's episode. He's like, you have to do the emotional heavy lifting for the audience. Do yourself a favor and give them something they already understand so that you can only do half the work. You know what I mean? That's why act outs are good, because we understand characters. We understand, like, if you act like this person, what that person is like. If you put us in a situation, you're at the DMV, we know what that's like. You know what I mean? Like, whatever it is, it can be relatable.
That's okay. I was going to ask you, was there anything with the cat joke that I saw that was not in the original version that you were like, this is an improvement during my workout process to make this joke better? Or, I mean, you kind of just said that, like, hey, this came out of the womb already brilliant. So like, was there any improvements that were made to this joke that you would, that you then took and now add to future jokes?
I mean, again, it's cutting out. I think the best improvement you can do is get that shit out of there. I like I said, I was really trying to tell people like this. Don't use Summer's Eve. It's bad for your vagina. But that's nobody gives a fuck about that. You know what I mean? What I'm here to do is say the funny part and the interesting part and the part that I could make funny is this is clearly bullshit because of the way we talk about it. I don't have to say Summer's Eve is poison for your vagina. I didn't need to say that because I'm telling you, take a look at this situation that's being presented to you. Is it in your best interest, or are they just trying to make you feel bad about yourself?
Yeah.
And I don't say any of that shit in the joke, but you leave being like, I'm going to throw that shit away at the end of the whatever. You know what I mean?
So let me talk about your delivery then, because this joke is a perfect example of delivering a joke as well, because your voice inflection goes from calm, laid back, almost like I need to like turn the volume up a little bit, to like screaming the one punchline. So like, is this, and if someone were to ask me, like, describe Alyssa's delivery, I would never say like their delivery is ranty and screamy. I would say it's very purposeful and slow, and like not slow like mentally slow, like slow, like
I love being slow. I love pauses.
like deliberate and careful. So like when you punctuate a punchline with like a scream, or I don't know what the like, is that like, do you do that only like when you're trying to push home a point, or was it like for this specific joke, like the lift to get the audience to understand was so heavy that the order to punctuate this one you had to scream it?
I'm just legit angry about this. Like, here's that vulnerability. Like, the vulnerability isn't just in what I say, it's how I say it. You know what I mean? Like, I want you to know that I'm upset that people talk to us like this, that we deserve better, and that I am going to fight for your vaginal smell to be normalized. Another time I yell is in a joke about a delivery driver who made a comment about my appearance, and I yell back at him.
Yeah.
Because it's the honest emotion. It's like, also one of my favorite comedic theory things is Rowan Atkinson has like a history of comedy video that's fantastic. And one of the things in there that he does so well, I love Rowan Atkinson. I grew up on British comedy.
I do too.
God, I love him so much. But there's that one bit where it's like, the funniest reactions are either overreaction or underreaction. Is where the humor comes. Like, if somebody hits you in the head with a frying pan and you don't do anything, that's hilarious. If someone taps you on the shoulder and you scream, that's hilarious. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, in this situation, like, nobody's threatening me with a knife to use Summer's Eve. Like, I don't need to be screaming on stage. Like, I'm getting paid to live my dream right now. I don't need to scream at you, but it helps.
Yeah.
And like I said, you can't do it all the time. And I start the joke with, listen, I have something I want to talk to you guys about because it's been weighing on my mind. And I create the tension. Like, first of all, it's you and me in this room. I want to tell you, I have a feeling, and I'm going to share that feeling with you now.
Yeah.
This sucks.
No, I mean, it does make it funnier. So I didn't know that was another tool in your tool belt that you used, or if that was just like, this joke needed this to lift the punchline to another level. So I just wanted to see if this like scream was something that you were using more frequently. Cool. Your joke, I think a lot of what I hear from these interviews I do is that the comics I respect have a very methodical and a very well thought out joke writing process, which translates to perfect jokes on stage. I want to know more about your career now, Alyssa, because it seems like you already have like this well thought out path of like, you have this talk show, you have the Yellow Punk forum that you're in, you do your stand. So it like, but these are very nuancy roads where it's like, can you sustain your lifestyle and living doing this, or do you foresee being a full-time comedic performer or stand-up? I don't know what you would call all of this hodgepodge of just comedy in general. Like, do you foresee that being a full-time thing, or these like you always just have like this more like side hustle with always needing like a day job?
Yeah, I feel like I'm I'm less hustly than I used to be, but I'm definitely still hustly. When I was working in restaurants, I was never working at one restaurant. I was at like 2 or 3 restaurants,
Oh,
and I got
wow.
a comedy gig, and I'm running these 2 game shows and
Yeah.
whatever, and I'm working on Yellow, whatever.
Yeah.
And now, I was lucky enough during the pandemic to get jobs with a couple of nonprofits,
Hmm.
and nonprofits are love creatives, and
Hmm.
they get money from people to pay artists. And
Hmm.
a lot of times, like at the beginning especially, they're going to pay you more for your brain than than normal. Like,
Hmm.
I'm not going to go 2 hours away for a $20 hosting spot anymore, because my rate is $50 an hour now. I'm not afraid to talk about how much I charge. Like,
Hmm.
that's how much I'm worth at the very least. That
Hmm.
depends on the job. But I would encourage people who are confident comedy writing. Like, I write jokes, and jokes for Abortion Access Front, social media, as well as for the script for our live streaming show, which is hosted by Daily Show co-creator Liz Winstead. And I got that from, through Chanel Ali, a great friend of mine,
Hmm.
and a wonderful giver of comedy advice as well. And I would be remiss to not mention her name in a podcast about my process,
She's been
because
on
she's
this.
been
She
a
was on
huge
last
part of it.
season. So I've already
I was
talked
I
about
was just about to yell at you and be like, "Hey, has Chanel been on here?"
it.
Because yeah, absolutely, just a font of knowledge.
I
But
agree.
don't ever forget about anybody you meet,
Hmm.
because and everybody's just as important. Like, the book the booker, that you respect, is just a guy, and the
Hmm.
comedian standing next to you, their day job needs someone like you. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like, it's
Hmm.
it's everybody is important. And there was a time in my life when I did not believe that to be true. But the longer I go out networking, people are scared of networking, but we're doing it. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? We're hanging out with each other. Everybody needs something, and you have a unique skill and talent that you can put out in the world. So I work for
Okay.
nonprofits. I'm a freelancer, so I have a bunch of contracts. So again, hustling,
Yeah.
um, hoping for the best. So yeah, and I doing comedy. Like,
Hmm.
Jade Guerrero has started using the word humorist for himself, and I rather
Hmm.
like that, because
Okay.
I used to want to go on the road and stuff, but I just want to be at home with my kitty cat and my boyfriend. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, is that great? Do I love traveling? Of course. I still apply to festivals. I still um, use festivals as a way to get myself out and travel and network.
Hmm.
Um, and some of my best opportunities have come from going to comedy festivals. So do it. It's worth the money.
Hmm.
Um, Especially the little ones. I find the little ones to be the most fun,
What's
and
your
then
favorite
and the
little
most
festival?
rewarding. It's not so little, but Motor City Comedy Festival was my absolute favorite. First of all, I love Detroit. Obviously, I love Michigan because I went to
Hmm.
college there. But I love Detroit. The comedians are so nice. First of all, they'll literally give you a place to sleep. Everybody has a car because it's fucking Detroit, and they'll
Yeah.
always offer you a ride. Somebody was like, "Oh, have you gotten sightseeing yet?" Okay, and they scheduled it for me. Somebody got me free marijuana. They fed me. They fed us like 2 or 3 times a day. I mean, it is the most incredible festival, and the people are so nice because it's Michigan and everybody's nice. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Please apply to Motor City Comedy Festival. It's usually in September.
Okay.
If you're
Awesome. Good plug. Good
listening,
plug. Um,
love
I'm
it.
let me just make an let me just give you my 2 cents on our conversation, Alyssa, as we wind down. I want to
Please
get to
hit
my
me.
compilation questions here. I feel like stand-up comedy, and I think you mentioned it, it's is the best thing that ever happened to you, Alyssa. I feel like it is your it's the childhood you never had. From what I understand and whatever you let me in, you didn't have a childhood where you could be you. And you keep saying to me, it's like stand-up is me just answering the questions everybody asks. I buy that somewhat. I think it's just for you to be able to tell your story and tell who you are. There's a need. You've been performing since you were 9. You want to tell the public who Alyssa Al-Dookhi is. Stand up whenever you start stand up. That was your second childhood. I feel like right now this pandemic is like your puberty, like getting into like you're figuring yourself out now. Like you're not going for the easy jokes. You're more confident in who you are. And I feel like if we had this conversation again in 10 years, I would get a whole new Alyssa Al-Dookhi, which you mentioned. You were like, I think you mentioned like, I don't know what I'm going to be in a year or
100%.
whatever. So and the fact that like you've been talking about how you love talking to children, you relate to kids. I still feel like this kid, like you're still 6, 7, 8 years old. Back when you started, now you're like 13, 14 in real life years, and you're just figuring it out. Like you're just like you're growing up so much as a comic, and like you're only gonna like if you're a beast now, like what are you gonna be like in 5 years, kind of thing. Like what kind of can't wait for that material. So with that being accurate phrase, accurate statement.
It definitely hit home, and the timeline works out, actually. I spend a lot of time with my inner child. It's somebody I respect very much. I check in on them a lot, like, "Hey, how you doing?" When we react to stuff. And I definitely have been like more 15 than I have in a very long time. I got to see the Smashing Pumpkins 30-year reunion tour on my 30th year as well. And I was just like, and Courtney Love was there, and the guy from Deftones. And I was just like, oh my God. And I just feel like, yeah, I'm definitely I'm a little rebellious. I don't actually give a fuck what anybody thinks about me anymore. I'm kind of like entering my teenage goth phase, like, again.
Well, even like those things.
I was
like
listening to my
like,
classic metal playlist today. Sorry.
I say like even talking about your parents, and you were like, no, we're shutting this down. Like I feel like that's like a very like teenage. If I asked like a teenager, tell me something about your parents, they would like this is inappropriate. But I feel like 5 years from now, when you're like in the 21-year-old phase of maybe that's a conversation that will be to figuring it out or whatever. So no, I think it's great. It's nice meeting teenage Alyssa Al-Dookhi.
They're so cool. They were the coolest version of me. I was such a I was weird, but I was a badass.
Awesome. Well, Alyssa, I'm extremely honored for you to be on the web series. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Please check them out at The Dookness on Twitter and Instagram, and their website. And thank you again, Alyssa, for coming on, and we'll be in touch.
Marc. Thank you so much. This has been so dope.